Welcome to Social Media Business, the podcast that covers building, managing, and monetizing social media. Brought to you by online community strategist Laurel Patworth. For more information, go to laurelpatworth.com.
Expert panelists chatting today. And then I'd like to go through some news of the day. They're hard to predict before the shows because it's usually the breaking news of the day. So today I thought I'd mention the Wikipedia blackout and a top issue. Also the Facebook status update of the sister of the head waiter that was on the cruise liner that sank.
Yeah,
and the reason I wanted to do that is, yeah, it was a very interesting story. And there's also that issue with the people who were live streaming a woman trying to pull men into lifeboats instead of putting the phones down and trying to help her pull the men into the lifeboats. And it was men that were using their phones to capture it. And that sort of that journalist question of, if you see shooting on the street, do you put your camera down and help people, or do you document it for posterity? You know, it's not a cut and dried issue, I don't think, but we can discuss that. Any other news of the day that you guys would like to hit on, like straight away, but current affairs type stuff in social media?
Well, I think the SOPA issue, although it pertains mainly to the US, I think it affects everyone, and I'd like to invite Shel to give his views on that.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I have, in support of the strike, I have been not using social media since 11:58 last night. I broke the fast because you guys are in Australia, and you know, my government isn't watching. It's turned out to be more successful than we thought. I've seen about 10 elected officials announce on Twitter that they were reversing their position. The co-authors of SOPA have now withdrawn their support. So for this time, A, it was killed. B, is that ad hoc, it took long enough, but we did organize fairly well over here. And 3 is the censorship issue will be back to bite us again and again and again, partly because there's some merits to the core case until the government decides to do what they're going to do with it, which is always frightening.
One of the things I just did a radio interview with one of our radio stations here, and was just really trying to point out that it does affect everybody, this ruling, because if the Americans can force Visa to shut down services to Flickr because there's photos up there they don't like, or YouTube, it doesn't just impact Americans, it impacts everybody in the world because we use all of those services as well. Yeah. And one day we might want to do Facebook ads and we can't pay for them because Visa's got an injunction against Facebook. That it doesn't just impact America, it impacts the whole world.
You can retweet me and not realize I used something that was a pirate of something, and you can be culpable to imprisonment. Some of the cases, I forgot what, somebody retweeted something about somebody who was sentenced to prison for 4 years, and they were guilty of a crime they could have been sent to prison for 5 years for having retweeted it. So the thing that was amazing.
When you sorry, absurdity.
What's that, Taya?
I said it's absurd when you actually hear it said out loud like that. It is actually quite absurd.
Let me give you a real world example that's actually happened at the Beijing Olympics. Families were taking photos of themselves in front of the Olympic rings, which is actually against the trademark rules.
Absolutely.
So the Olympic Committee sued Flickr and all the photo sharing sites to take down photos, family photos that people had taken of themselves in front of the rings. Now, the merchandising of the Olympics is just an abomination, full stop, and the revenues around that. But that whole idea that now every single site is at risk for posting those photos, you know, Facebook could be sued, those sites can have their revenues dried up by Visa. or because a family took a photo of themselves in front of the Olympic rings. What do you guys think of that?
Well, it reminds me of the PayPal sort of issue where, PayPal used to have a reputation of just, killing, accounts dead because someone somewhere complained about something. But this just takes it to a whole new level.
I really would love to see the politicians pass something that makes everybody that photographed their kid at Disneyland hugging Mickey Mouse a criminal. I'll give you political change.
It's that retarded, isn't it?
It really is.
And it is that bad. Every kid that dresses up as Lady Gaga, every person that holds up their Kim Kardashian DVD set and says, "Look what I've just bought," anything like that.
Well, that's two of my behaviours cut there and then.
You disco bunny.
I just, before I answer Lee, I want to know if we're on the record or not right now.
I'll sue anyone who retweets that.
She's taping.
I'm going to stick to M-I-C-K-E-Y.
So if we can, let's move on to the other topic of the day. And I'm a bit concerned because my vision is out of sync with my voice, but hey-ho, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, but is your lipstick really that ruby, or is that just the screen, or are you honoring Stephen's bird?
The other topic of the day, I think, is the ship that went down, the cruise liner that went down off of the coast. Is it the Mediterranean?
It was close to Florence, Italy.
It was close to Firenze. Okay. I used to live in Italy, so I kind of know what it's like over there. But the ship, one of the women on Facebook, she's the sister of the head waiter, posted up on Facebook, the captain is bringing the cruise ship close to shore so that my brother-in-law can wave at us from the ship. I'm so excited. And then after that, she kept documenting what happened with the cruise liner that did indeed come too close to shore and eventually sunk and sadly taking lives. I'm interested in that perspective, and also the one of the story of the woman who, again, she posted this on Facebook, that she spent her time pulling people out of the water while other people use their mobile phones to live stream to YouTube and other live streaming sites. And I suspect also doing Facebook and Twitter updates, what was going on. So in other words, live streaming potentially their death. And her dismay that they weren't helping her help people into the lifeboats. So what's your perspective on that, guys?
It's, the whole context of being addicted to media and, your 5 seconds of fame. It's kind of, people lose perspective in times of crisis because maybe people don't think they're going to die. Or don't realize the inherent risk associated with their circumstances. And so they just, because it's part of their vernacular and their behavior, they don't consider the ramification when people are dying around them. It's very sad, actually.
I agree. I think we all agree that it's sad. What worries me, though, is that I know of my own behaviour. There would be an element of, I'm going to get this up before anyone else does.
Yeah.
Well,
it's
I've got to tell you, I've got a different perspective, but I'll come to mine in a moment. Shel, what were you going to say?
Actually, I've got two perspectives. One is, I'd like some good old-fashioned journalistic drilling in to be sure that what was said by this woman is actually true. And one of the technical issues, having been in that part of the country, is I couldn't get any connection. I don't know how they did it on a lifeboat surrounded by rocks on the Italian coast. So there is some doubt of authenticity to the story where she positions herself as the one heroine who then rushes to Facebook. And so I've been doing this for a long time.
I know what you're saying. It needs to be checked. And I guess the other question is she just crossed that her mobile phone fell overboard, which is, I'm being satirical here because one of the questions that I have is, I'm on flights all the time. I probably do at least 4 flights a week. And one of the things I think about, because, hey, that's just me, is if this plane goes down, what is the first thing I'm going to do? And the first thing I'm going to do is get on my phone and tell family and friends that I love them. And if I can't do a one-to-one, in other words, I have to prioritize who I love the most, I will record what's happening and hopefully a message to them, and hope that somehow or the other it gets onto Facebook or the phone survives if I can't stream it live, so that my last thoughts are, that they know my last thoughts are of them. So that's one of my questions, is what was the message that they were doing? Were they doing, oh, this is cool, the boat's tilting, and then showing the phone? Or were they actually trying in what potentially could be their last moments to reach out to the people that they love? And I think the other question is about documenting or live streaming life is,
well, just to add to my verification doubts, all these live streams, I haven't seen one posted. So if that's what they were doing,
that's an interesting one. Yes.
Where is the document?
Where is it? And why isn't it on the evening news?
I got to tell you,
we're seeing photos, though. We are seeing photos.
I have a lot of hot buttons connected to this as somebody who's been at sea a lot. Only an idiot would take a ship carrying 4,000 people through an area like that, and apparently this guy has been written up for doing it previously. So, but now I completely forgot the point that I burst in here.
What were you doing at sea? What were you doing at sea, Shel? Seashell. Wow.
What I find interesting in this discussion is we as social media people are having the kind of discussion that I had for many years as a media person. What do you do? When I wasn't a student protester, I was covering student protests for Time Magazine. When I saw somebody beaten and gassed, was it my job to record it or help? And it was a very good question. When I'm forgetting his name, Jack North, who I think is Jack something, who is our senior social media guy at the Pentagon. He comes from Oklahoma City, and he was a volunteer shuttling the media into the act of terrorism we had there. And when there were bodies strewn on the street, he turned to cameramen and said, "We need some help getting them on ambulances." And they looked at him like he was the craziest guy in the world and said, "We're videoing this for CBS." And it's a very
We're not paid to call for ambulances.
Yeah, we don't call for ambulances. We photograph people dying in the streets.
Yeah. I think there's an intrinsic moment that happens when like a split-second decision where you realize whether or not you can help, and then you choose to kind of help. Or whether you realise that there's nothing you can do other than to document it. I think that's something that I'd be deliberating.
There have been questions about this before with people who've documented riots, and there was one guy who documented the shooting with his mobile phone, and there was questions there, and he said, "Well, what can I do? Tackle the shooter? I just get shot, so I'm filming it, so for future, so that it can be used, I guess." Tay, what do you think?
Well, I actually think that I'm going to sort of jump back a bit from the actual story and talk about the psychology of this, which is very interesting. Because what you were talking, Shel, earlier about this being a journalist's problem and a journalist's dilemma, or but now everybody has to make these ethical decisions who may not even be equipped to make these decisions. And what a responsibility it is to be sitting in, all you are is a customer on a cruise ship that's gone down, and you are now global news because you and having your ethics and your decision making scrutinized because you've had to make a decision about whether to record or to help. And I think that, I find personally, and I guess I'm probably a good commentator on the idea of scrutiny, a private citizen having a lot of ethical scrutiny and all those sorts of things, and the psychological struggle that you go through with private citizens becoming public. And I think it's quite extraordinary to observe that. So
I know what you're saying, but one of the questions that I've had for a long time is that we've always handed over our ethics to other authorities. The government, the police, and the media tell us what our ethics are. And perhaps the meaning of community is when we not only unite around a purpose, but also around an ethical and a value system. And so we're being forced into situations at the moment where we say if we want the global village, then we have to give up privacy. Privacy is an anathema to global village and vice versa. Or is it? Can we set boundaries? And if we are part of the global village, then we better get the whole of the village thinking about what the ethical and constraints are in that village.
And recognising that at the same time you're always going to have outliers anyway. So even if you set, this is the boundary, this is the ethical boundary, and we won't stray out of this, there will always be people who will be on the edge.
Yeah, I agree with that. Totally.
In fact, they work really hard to be the bad boys of the network. In my online communities, they really work hard to get that reputation of being a badass. Were you ever a bad boy, Shel?
I object to the word "were."
Fair enough. Okay. We've done this a little bit back to front. I had suggested that we introduce each other first, and then we go to the news of the day, and we went straight into the news of the day. But that's okay. We'll sort this out next time. And for those people who are listening to the show or watching the show, this is the first one that we're doing. We're inflicting it on you so that you can give us your feedback on what could be done better, and you can state the bleeding obvious. Or you can come up with some other ideas and some segments you like. So the segments at the moment are the current. We've just done some of the current news. Then the guys are going to introduce themselves, and they're going to introduce a question or a situation that they'd like the panel to discuss themselves. So a topic or a philosophy or an industry that might need some help in the area of community building. I'm also, not for this show, but debating in the future, having a section called Bag the Sponsor. We invite a sponsor to come on to the show, and we abuse them and tell them what they're doing wrong and show them all the tweets and the Foursquare reviews. It's all lots of fun, but this is a not-for-profit show, and I'd like that money to actually go to a charity. So it'll all be in good fun, and if you'd like to sponsor the show, and sit in the hot seat and be bagged as the sponsor, then this is definitely the crowd to give you the hard time about what you're doing and not doing in community building. What do you guys think of that idea?
I can just see the sponsors lining up now.
Yeah.
Well, some of the cheekier sponsors will. I think people who are very, very protective of their brands won't. But humour is such an important part of community building, and the slings and arrows and the toing and throwing and debate, and it's all in good fun. So I'm hoping that, and they may actually learn something from us saying, what were you thinking? Who knows?
Laurel, I would suggest that we post an ad up on Craigslist saying masochist wanted.
I'd like to nominate.
Yeah, I can just see the ad now. If your brand's not being trashed enough in social media, come to us. We'll trash it for you. But this kind of anti-ad thing works so well sometimes for companies.
Oh my God, that was priceless.
If you're interested, let us know. So, victim number one, who'd like to go first? Introduce themselves and then give make a proposition to.
Let's take this offline.
Lee, I'm going to pick on you because nobody stuck their hand up. Would you like to introduce yourself in a couple of sentences and then perhaps talk a little bit about what you're interested in, and then open it up for discussion?
Okay, all right. Thank you, Laurel. Oh, hello. Someone's walking in the house. I can hear someone walking. Who's got someone walking in the house?
I have. I confess. Yeah. You're on.
It's the ghost of Stephen Parr.
Yes. Come and say hello quickly, Nanette.
Hello.
G'day, Nanette.
This is at Ms. Gourmet. She can't hear you. Hang on. She's just got her new wellies. You're hijacking. Can't see them. Hang on.
Complete toss-up.
There you go. Okay, see ya.
Can't hear where this
Hang on.
So, Stephen, you don't just
Go,
live with a
Sue.
bird,
All
huh?
right, bye.
Stephen, you don't
Lee,
just live
our
with a bird.
apologies. Sort of go ahead if you'd like to introduce yourself and your position.
Okay, all right, thank you. My name's Lee Hopkins. I'm a social media strategist. I've been involved in social media since around about 2005 and have spoken here and overseas on social media issues. What I wanted to talk about today is I've been doing some work over the last few months with various local councils, local government, and my heart goes out to the local community or to the communicators there in these local governments, because they want to join in the conversation, but their hands are tied behind their backs, as it were, because of the process that they have to go through to get any decisions made within council. It has to go up through various layers of management, and then it's got to go through to the councillors themselves. Now, these councillors only meet, there's 15 or so of them, they only meet once a month. And trying to get them to talk about these issues at the same time as talk about a whole lot of other issues is really difficult. So the poor communicators have to find ways of hand-holding and leading the councillors through an educative process so they can come out the other side with some sort of idea. Yes, social media is a good thing. These are the risks. These are the benefits, and this is why and what we are going to do to further engage our communities. So my thoughts are around those poor communicators who are wanting to do it but are stuck. And I'm wondering if the panel has any ideas of how they've seen it work in the past, or they've actually worked with councils to help bring about change and to bring about these new communication technologies.
Who'd like to go first in helping local councils? I think you'd call them boroughs, or is that English?
That's English. That's English. Boroughs.
Who'd like to go first?
I'll go first. As an American Lee, I think all you should do is emulate how our local governments work and how responsive they are to their constituents, and you'll be all set. The truth of the matter, that was a joke for those of you.
I was just
Is
Shel kidding me?
Please. Please. The only thing...
That's very, very funny.
Let me begin with a serious observation. I've had the good fortune in the last few years to travel to a lot of countries. And with the exceptions of two countries, Singapore and Estonia, I'll come back to them, what I shared in common with everybody I spoke with is we're unhappy with our elected officials on the local level, on the regional level, and on the national level. What I found interesting is this isn't true in Estonia or Singapore, and I thought about it for a while, and I realized those were the two smallest countries I'd visited. And the governments were physically close to the people. In Estonia, I had a cup of coffee in a coffee house across from Parliament with the Prime Minister of the country. And people walked by and they waved, and somebody asked him if the babysitter had worked out, and he was the head of state.
Wow.
And what we have is an opportunity everywhere. I can't talk about Australian local government, but we have an opportunity for local elected officials to stay closer with their constituents. I don't know if that can successfully scale to the national level, but on a hometown level where the issue is, well, snow removal in certain areas or better schools or safe streets and stuff like that, there is an enormous opportunity to use what tools there are to hear what people have to say to government. And as far as teaching them what to say, all they really have to do is learn how to say whatever it was that got them elected or appointed to begin with, because that was pretty well received. What happens, though, is once you get elected, your focus goes from listening to the people to getting reelected. And now we can make a harmony between those two things, that if you want to get reelected, you now have the tools where you can show you're listening to the people. If you do that, all sorts of social good can happen. You don't need, in our country we call them PACs, I don't know what you call them, but they're where the fat bucks are put so that they can be sifted off to people without you knowing exactly who's paying this guy off. And, you know, you don't need that if the government and the people can actually interact with each other. Social media makes that scalable for the first time, and I would love to see more of it on the hometown level, everywhere in the world, everywhere.
Yeah.
Except
look, yeah. No. Sorry,
ahead.
go on, Laura. No. You go ahead, Laura.
I work with councils in New South Wales and Victoria, Albury and Blacktown and councils like that. And I think they focus very much on broadcasting their message out and using social media as a broadcast channel, or not that particular council, but many of the councils do. And then those councils come to me and say, you know, what else can we do with these channels rather than simply telling the same story over and over again. And I'm a bit concerned because I actually think representational democracy is in trouble. Why do I need a local council when I should be able to go to a community, a geolocated community? You know, everybody in my location belongs to this community. They decide what the issues are, vote on them, and then allocate resources that way. So for instance, with Fix My Streets, you don't just take a photo of what's wrong in your local council area, maybe a park bench is broken, but people vote on which service, they vote on which thing they want to have fixed first, and then they get a working party together to go fix that thing. So in a sense, in all social media, we disintermediate the mediator, and I think councils are mediators. And so we remove the council out of the equation, and the community collaborates to fix itself. The biggest showing of that, I think, was the Twitter usage for the riot cleanup in London. The councils had no show at all on Twitter, but Twitter was being used by the participants to organise their own riot cleanup. And the response from the government was shut Twitter down during times of hardship. So I'm a big believer that government has to move from being a service to being a platform. If they want to stay effective, they have to offer the Fix My Streets type of platform, and that enables the community to come together, truly be a community, truly vote on their own issues. So we're in the post-representational democracy phase era. What do you guys think?
Look, I think there's some really interesting things there. Towards the end of 2010, I was involved in helping put together a strategy for the South Australian government where, for the first time ever, they actually socialised the strategic plan for the state. And we actually built an online portal to enable them to do that. And you know, during its basically put it out to the people and asked them what they wanted for their state. And within a matter of months, there were 70,000 people communicating, participating on that site for the SA plan. And when the actual period of socialisation had come to a close, that community remained really vibrant, and there was a lot of incredible discussions about both urban and regional community and what they really wanted as prioritised for the state.
What was the name of the community again?
It was with basically the South Australia Strategic Plan. It was the SA Plan. Yeah.
Because Lee asked for some examples. I also think the Future of Melbourne wiki, where people were asked to visualise what Melbourne would look like in the future, and to upload photos and put together some plans so that the community collaboratively created their town. I think that was an interesting one. So I don't know if you're familiar with those two. But Lee, you're Lord Mayor of Adelaide is an excellent user of social media, don't you think? He's often tweeting about what's happening at the Adelaide markets, and parking and all sorts of things.
He is. Stephen is an excellent communicator, and I was very fortunate to be one of the early advisors to him on how to engage in the social media world. And in fact, he took me on a yes, there was a bit of a win there. He took me on a little tour around the Adelaide Council chambers, and showed me the table that Colonel Light actually mapped out Adelaide on, before he actually then, went on and, said, build this, build that. But the actual table...
I think just at this moment, I just would like to just interrupt and point out to the overseas people and non-Australians listening is that Adelaide is a square, and then that square is cut into 4 other squares. So as far as laying out cities... all right, I'll be quiet right now. That was a bit rude.
I was just wondering.
It's one big square, right? Like,
is that where
do you need for a square?
I was just wondering if one of you Australians could verify this. Is that how we got the name Foursquare?
Yeah, it's actually a grid. It's a city designed on a grid.
It's a city design, and Canberra was designed by the same guy, and it's a circle with other circles within it. So we call one roundabout world and the other one the square city. But Lee, I'm an Adelaidean, you know that, so I'm allowed to abuse my own hometown, and Stephen Yarwood won't mind. Maybe you will. Sorry, but yeah, you go on, and I know that you've lost your thread of thought now.
Yeah, I've completely lost it, so... yeah. But yes, Stephen Yarwood, yes, that was it. Stephen Yarwood, yes, he's an excellent. He's one of the very few political agents that I've seen that is cognizant and actually uses social media really well to engage with his communities. And sort of, I wish more were like him.
Now, Shel, what do you call your Lord Mayors? Are they governors or something?
We call most of our elected officials a word that rhymes with tadpoles. We have in our cities we have mayors. In our state houses we have governors, and in Congress we have rogues and scallywags.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
same
pretty
here.
much. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Lee, does any of that help answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. That's given me a couple of just a couple of ideas.
Go on, Taya.
I have an add-on that I'm sorry. Go ahead, Taya.
Okay. I just had more. A lot of your question was actually about how the organisation adapts, rather than how they actually adapt to real-time communication. And what we're actually seeing in the policy cycle is that rather than consultation and engagement happening at sort of the end of the policy process, they're actually having to engage very early on and involve people, and that's actually something that's really great. But the organisation itself actually has no choice but to adapt, because I work with a few politicians as well, and what we're actually seeing is that those that do well are doing really well, and those that don't get it actually, they're afraid and they just have no idea how to use social media, and they're actually paying the price for it. I actually think, we've had, Eric Ripper lose his leadership in WA yesterday, and how much that his incapacity to engage online, I do wonder how, whether that has had an impact. But I thought that was quite interesting anyway, that in terms of the policy cycle and the structure of the organisation, they have no choice but to now engage throughout the process rather than just as an afterthought.
Excellent.
I just want
Go ahead, Shel.
Very quickly, just 2 thoughts, because I've been sarcastic about it. But I think local government should focus on little issues that can be solved. Little issues that can be solved using social media. In Newcastle, England, they got into social media by announcing school closings. They did it because they couldn't decide when the schools were going to close till 5 in the morning, but they had to announce the closing on the BBC the night before. So they suddenly started using Facebook and Twitter to tell people what schools were open or closed during bad weather. Ferry schedules. This sort of stuff.
You're absolutely right. Crisis communication often propels organisations that have been, Taya's right, terrified. Crisis communication forces them to the front. Because I've looked at the chart of all the retweeting during the Queensland floods. The top 10 retweeters were local people who were trusted for giving the right information. The 10th to 20th percentile were a couple of major services, I think a couple of media services and the police. The government, particularly local government, did not show up anywhere as far as stepping up during crisis communication to ensure that the information reached the right people about the floods at the right time. Now, I'm sure people can contact me, and I hope they do, in response to this video and tell me examples of where that's not true and the council were out there doing things. But if you rely on the old way of doing something, you will pay a price. There is a cost of inaction and a COI for this. So, Lee, if I were you, and what I often do is I talk to them about the COI, the cost of inaction, of not being involved in this, and then try and take them through. I have 7 steps, you can pick any number, 7 steps towards full engagement. You know, the first one is using it as a broadcast channel, and then move them all the way through to a peer-to-peer government as platform sort of solution. All right, thanks, Lee. Who'd like to go next? I just want to move this one along so that people don't have to listen to a War and Peace video that goes on for hours. and I know I'm taking up more time than I wanted to. So who'd like to go next?
Can I go next?
Stephen.
All right. I want to.
Huxley on Twitter. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Stephen Johnson. I'm at Huxley, and I am quite passionate about decentralized action and creating movements around things that are important, whether they be big global things or things that are happening in local community. I founded a social enterprise catalyst called Altitude midway through 2010, and that's kind of working with as an incubator for social enterprises, and it's also a bit of a decentralized agency. So the topic that I wanted to talk about today was social technology improving the human condition. And in my work, I've seen it's a big topic, I realise, so trying to rein it in around some key areas of focus. I was thinking about shaping identity and meaning, and how do we create value in ecosystems which are persistently disruptive, as well as in the context of changing paradigms, how social enables us to exchange ideas, to collaborate, to share our vulnerabilities, and in the way that it's connected to what's deeply within us, and that's to leave a legacy. So I want to kind of put it to the panel to see what you think about the potential for social technology to change or improve the human condition and to create lasting effect and impact.
Well, certainly, I think that there's a potential for every man to benefit, but in particular, I've had some small dealings with those who are disabled, and I go back to the era of Second Life, and Second Life for them was tremendously enabling, because suddenly people who are wheelchair bound, for example, or other conditions, were able to engage in a fantasy life which for them was almost real. Their mind was very quickly taking on what it was seeing on the screen and believing it as real. And so I think these new social technologies, where you've got the opportunity to get out from being stuck in a constraint, and you can go and engage with other people, even though you might be physically stuck where you are. I think those technologies are fantastic for the human condition.
Yeah.
Taya, what do you think?
Sorry, well, from that, I think, and using the e-health example is actually a really, really good one, because, and that's just not just Second Life, but in terms of health communities, people who can, with chronic illness, who might not be able to connect or go to a support group locally, are actually, the lupus community stands to mind, where there's a massive global community of people who deal with chronic pain and fatigue and all of those sorts of issues, who actually communicate. And I think that that's quite an extraordinary thing for people, especially with rare diseases, who may be, one of 10 people in their state who have issues, or, that was just what I was interested in with what Lee said. But,
so I agree. And Shel, Shel, do you want to have anything to say on this one?
I always have something to say on everyone, but
that's why we love you.
I love you too. Can we go offline now, Silk Charm?
Go on, Shel.
No, I can't ask you that. No, but seriously, folks, no. But seriously. Since 2005, I've probably done about 500 interviews. I'm sorry, Lee, there have been others. I'm sorry, Laurel, there have been others.
But this is the best interview.
About how people use social media all over the world. And the number of stories that I've heard, including yours, Laurel, as I pause to say, shows how social media... Your story of going to the Middle East and helping Muslim women set up a social network is an example that is recurrent in everything from people with terminal cancer talking in a hashmark chat on Twitter. But I've been hit by so many stories about how the human animal helps other human animals, how people, a woman in Adelaide, Australia, I forgot that country for a minute, but she always got made fun of because she fancied hummingbirds, which isn't that popular a pastime in Australia. And then she started a blog and she posted pictures of hummingbirds, and she found dozens, if not hundreds, but dozens of people all over the world who liked hummingbirds, and they shared pictures. And they found, each one of them found there are others like me. There are others that suffer with my disease. There are others who have the passion that I have. To me, what Stephen is talking about goes to the very heart of what makes social media such a game changer for just about everything. And so you began by saying you're very focused on local issues, and I guess I'm the reverse. I look at local issues and say, what's the global truth to this? What's the universal wisdom to this? I see it all the time.
Look, that's a great point. I think the context of decentralized action is about local being global. It's the inside-out approach. Yeah. So it's. I mean, some of the work that I've done in communities around health with the UN, for example, to raise awareness around, malaria endemic countries, and, for example, I went to the Solomon Islands in 2008 with the UN, and that was post the 2007 earthquake tsunami, and I was asked to basically look at how social media could get the stories out of the people whose lives had been affected by that tragedy, and I find that many organisations, aid organisations, try and actually come in with a band-aid, but they don't actually. When they leave, the same people are there, often fumbling, not really knowing what to do. And I found in my own work that the most effective way forward is to look at how you can empower the local people to get their story out, and to create awareness that way. And so it's kind of, it is definitely inside out. And there's lots of different approaches. And as you said, hummingbirds is a brilliant example. You're talking about the digitization of the village and people sharing stuff with total strangers that become their most cherished friends, some of whom they've never met before. And so then that opens the whole context of intimacy and how, from a human condition perspective, and what is intimacy? What is the changed paradigm around intimacy in relationships now?
There are two people I'm looking at in the strip across the bottom who I consider old friends. if I walked across, maybe it's the Bay Area persuasions, but if I saw Laurel, I'd go up and I'd hug her automatically. Same for you, Lee. You're old friends. I've been reading your thoughts and your wisdom. I've read about you when you're pissed off. Laurel starts inviting me over for a beer when it's a day behind her. You know, we keep meeting old friends for the first time. We keep discovering there are people all over the world who feel like we do. And to me, that's the whole hook. That's why I've become this obsessive, compulsive follower of where social media goes.
Welcome to Social Media Business, the podcast that covers building, managing, and monetizing social media. Brought to you by online community strategist Laurel Patworth. For more information, go to laurelpatworth.com.